The apartment was an icebox, the stale air thick with baby formula and damp laundry. Jake Carter sat curled on the fraying carpet, his back braced against a peeling wall, the tiny bundles pressed to his chest. The twins whimpered softly, and his hand, callous from his last 3 jobs, moved in a slow, steady rhythm over their backs. The cold seeped through his worn army jacket, but he didn't move. Their warmth was all that mattered. He was so lost in keeping them warm that he didn't hear the door open not until a pair of polished leather shoes stopped inches from his head. Jake looked up sharply, his green eyes calm but alert, a silent fortress guarding his precious. Fragile cargo dot in the doorway stood a man who looked as though he'd stepped from another world. Richard Hale immaculate in a tailored suit froze. Mid-step, his presence as out of place as a diamond in the dirt. Jake's arms tightened around the twins. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a low, steady command, the echo of countless checkpoints and hostile stares. Richard didn't answer. His gaze swept the room, the mismatched blankets, the battered thermos, the overturned box serving as a table. The silence stretched, thick with the scent of poverty and need, before his eyes settled on the babies, swaddled in cloth that had clearly been washed and reused too many times. "I came to see the tenant," Richard said finally, holding a folded eviction notice. Jake adjusted one of the babies, whose tiny cry broke the silence. "You've seen him. What do you want?" Richard opened his mouth for some clipped retort, then stopped. There was something in Jake's voice and unshaken steadiness, the kind you heard from men who'd been through fire and refused to break. "They're your kids." "Yeah," Jake replied without flinching. "And before you start about rent time, working 3 jobs, just got tight this month." Richard's eyes swept the room again. No toys, no crib, not neglect survival. A cough rattled from one twin, and without hesitation Jake reached for the thermos, poured water into a bottle, and tested it against his wrist. Every motion was instinctive, practiced, loving. Something twisted in Richard's chest. "Why are you sleeping on the floor?" "Because the couch is busted and the floor keeps them warmer." "I'm not asking for pity." Silence stretched between them. Richard looked from the room to the twins and back to Jake, then slid the folded eviction notice back into his coat pocket. He said nothing, simply turning his hand palm up in a gesture of surrender. "I can't evict you," he said, his voice softer now. "That's not what this is about anymore." Jake's eyes narrowed. "And what is it about?" "To help, if you'll let me." Jake didn't trust him. Men in $1,000 suits didn't show up unless they wanted something. But Richard stepped further inside. "I'm not here to make you feel small," he said, almost reading Jake's thoughts. "But I can't walk out pretending I didn't see this." Jake's mouth was sharp. "You've seen worse." Richard shook his head. "Not like this. Not a man sleeping on the floor with 2 babies, ready to take on the world if it comes to his door." Jake's jaw tightened. "I don't want handouts." "I'm not offering a handout," Richard said firmly. "I'm offering an opportunity." Jake gave a humorless laugh. "Sounds too good to be true." "You're ex-military," Richard said. 2 tours, commendations, honorably discharged. I need someone like that." Jake froze. "You looked me up." "I had to. I own the building. Your name crossed my desk and I had to see for myself. Say it plain. I run a private security firm. There's a high-profile client who needs someone trustworthy, discreet, unshakable. I think you're that person." "Why me?" "You don't know me." Richard's eyes didn't waver. "I saw the way you hold them. That's not something you can fake if you can protect them like that. I know you can protect anyone." Jake's pulse thudded. This wasn't just a job. It was a lifeline, but lifelines always had hooks. And what's the catch? No catch. The danger is real, but it's a controlled kind. Losing everything. That's a different kind of danger. I could stop that from happening. The next morning, Jake stood outside a skyscraper of glass and steel, his worn army jacket jarring against the sea of expensive coats streaming into the lobby. A baby carrier was strapped to his chest, both twins nestled inside, a small, visible sign of the strength that propelled him forward. He felt a fan to make in his back from the sleepless night, but the quiet, rhythmic breaths of the twins were the only payment he needed. He squared his shoulders, a soldier reporting for a new kind of duty. Richard was already waiting, speaking to a sharp-eyed woman in a navy suit. When she saw Jake, her brows rose slightly, her gaze lingering on the sight of the father with his children strapped to his chest, a stark contrast to the sterile opulence around them. "You came," Richard said, a hint of genuine surprise in his voice. "I said I'd hear you out. Doesn't mean I'm signing my life away." Inside, the marble floors gleamed, outlined the walls, abstract splashes of color that seemed to mock the dull gray of his world. People in tailored suits gave Jake quick, curious glances before looking away, their eyes skating over his worn jacket and the incongruous side of the baby carrier. He felt like an alien, a ghost of a life he no longer lived. Now haunting the halls of the city's elite, he held his head high. Their judgment was a weight he was accustomed to die in the elevator. The silence was heavy, broken only by the gentle hum of the machinery. Richard's voice was quiet. "I'm not asking you to change. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are where it matters. And why can't your trained men handle this? Because sometimes the best protector isn't the one with the sharpest aim. It's the one with the strongest reason never to fail. My men are professionals. You're a father. There's a difference." The elevator doors opened into a private floor. The air here was different, still and hushed, like a museum after closing hours. Richard led him into a spacious office where a young woman stood by the window, her back to them. She turned, her gaze locking on the baby carrier before lifting to Jake's face. A flicker of something, recognition and sorrow, crossed her features. "It's you," she whispered. Her voice barely a breath. Jake frowned. "Do we know each other?" "Once, a long time ago." Her eyes were still on the babies, a profound sadness in their depths. Richard cleared his throat. "Jake, this is my daughter, Emma. She's the client." Jake's voice was cautious. "What am I protecting her from? The kind of people who don't care about laws. The kind who see people like her as leverage." Emma stepped forward, eyes softening at the sight of the twins. She seemed to be fighting an inner battle, her face a mask of restrained emotion. "Can I?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jake hesitated, then handed one over. She cradled the baby with surprising tenderness, her touch gentle and unsure, as if she hadn't held a child in years. A small, genuine smile finally graced her lips. "All right," Jake said, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I'll hear the rest." Hours later, in a glass-walled conference room, Richard spoke low. "The man after her, Victor Kane. Dangerous, ruthless. She's been receiving threats for months. I've increased security, but he has eyes everywhere. I need someone who thinks like a soldier." Jake's arms folded. "And what makes you think this won't put me and my kids in danger? Because you'll be living here, in the penthouse, full security, everything your kids need, no strings." Before Jake could reply, Emma appeared with the twins, her voice gentle. "They're incredible. One just stared at me like he was reading my soul. Then her gaze sobered. She looked at Jake, the mask of polite composure finally gone, replaced by a raw, naked vulnerability. "I remember you, overseas, roadside checkpoint. Our convoy was ambushed. You pulled me out. I never knew your name until yesterday." The memory hit Jake like a physical blow. The dust, the fire, the screaming. He remembered the young woman he dragged from the wreckage, her arm twisted, her face streaked with soot and tears. He had carried her to the medic tent, never expecting to see her again. It was just another day, another face in the chaos. A duty he had performed without a second thought, but one that had haunted her for years. Richard's voice was firm. "Now you know why I trust you." It wasn't just a job. To him, it was a reflex. He protects without question. Emma's eyes met his, a new, deeper understanding passing between them. "If you say yes, you're not just protecting me, You're making sure what happened back then never happens again." She wasn't talking about the ambush. She was talking about the loss of innocence, the feeling of being hunted, the shadow of fear that had followed her since. She saw his struggle, and in him she saw a reflection of her own, a quiet strength born from hardship. Jake glanced at his children, then back at her. "I'm in, but my way." By nightfall, Jake stood in the penthouse, the twins asleep in real cribs for the first time. The quiet hum of the high-rise replaced the drafty silence of the old apartment. He stood by the window, looking out at the glittering cityscape, feeling an odd mix of relief and unease. This was a new battlefield. Emma appeared with a blanket. Its soft was a shocking contrast to the scratchy military-issue ones he was used to. "It's not army issue, but it's warm," she said softly. She stood beside him, and for a moment, they were just a people, sharing a quiet space. "You've been in survival mode so long," she said, her voice a gentle whisper. "You've forgotten what it feels like to just breathe." She wasn't just talking about him. She was talking about herself. Both of them had been holding their breath for years. Before he could answer, the intercom buzzed. A guard's voice crackled. "Package downstairs for Miss Hale. No return address, Emma's." Color drained. Jake's voice was sharp, cutting through the sudden fear in the room. "Don't touch it. I'll come down." Minutes later, he was examining a plain brown box in the lobby. His instincts, honed by years of conflict, screamed caution. The box was sealed with care, but the weight of it was all wrong. It wasn't a bomb. He knew that. It was a message. Get the bomb tech. Keep her upstairs. When he returned, Emma was pacing, her hands clenched. "It's handled," he said, his voice flat. "From now on, nothing comes through without my say." Emma looked at him, her gaze lingering. "You're more than a bodyguard." Jake didn't answer right away. He simply walked to the cribs, checking on the twins, a steady, protective presence. He adjusted a blanket, his hand trembling slightly with a mix of fear and resolve. "I protect what's mine," he said, his voice low. "That includes my kids and the people I've sworn to protect." Emma walked to the cribs, her hand hovering over the sleeping babies as she watched him. The man who had once pulled her from an ambush was now a father, and she understood. He wasn't a hero driven by duty, but a protector driven by love. In this moment, they weren't just client and bodyguard. They were the people who had seen the worst of the world, and now, by a twist of fate, were fighting to protect something pure and innocent from it. The package downstairs was just the beginning. The war was far from over. But for the first time in years, Jake and Emma weren't fighting alone. They were a team. And for the first time in a long time, the weight on Jake's shoulders felt a little lighter.